Hello, everyone, and happy Veterans Day. Some of you may be wondering why we're in school on Veterans Day when many of our surrounding school districts are not in session. First, every student attends school the same number of days, regardless of what district they're in. So if we're in session today, then that means we're off on a day that those students are in session. But much more important than that is that we feel it's important to be here so we can learn a little bit about why our country has designated a special day just for veterans. My guess is that many, if not most of you, know someone who is a veteran. Perhaps you may have even known someone who gave their life for our country. It's very difficult for those of us who are not in the military to truly appreciate the sacrifices that our veterans make for all of us. Being away from loved ones for an extended period of time and putting yourself in harm's way is a regular part of what it means to be a veteran. Each year, hundreds of thousands of people from across the globe try to legally come to the United States, proof that this is still one of the greatest countries on earth. If you ask those people why they want to come here, many of them will talk about how safe it is compared to where they come from, where war is common. Others may talk about freedom of religion and not having to worry about being persecuted for practicing your religion. And still others may talk about freedom of speech and how incredibly nice it is to be able to say what you want without fear of being harmed for doing so. All of those things that we hold sacred and frequently take for granted happen because we have brave men and women serving in our armed forces and fighting to protect those freedoms. Today, we will honor many of our veterans at a flag raising at James Hart as we thank them and all of their colleagues in arms for their service. I ask that you do the same thing the next time you see a veteran, whether it's a family member you know, or perhaps just a stranger that you cross in the street who might be in uniform. Please take time to thank them for what they do for each and every one of us. I hope that you enjoy the Veterans Day presentation that we have as you learn a little bit about the history of this national holiday. Thank you for listening. And now, we honor America with a performance of the Star-Spangled Banner by the James Hart Symphonic Orchestra and Panther Choir.
The Star-Spangled Banner. I'm sure most of you have heard that song probably many times, but I bet not very many of you know the story behind it. So our story today begins in the year 1814 in this new young republic of the United States of America. How young? Well, remember, the United States had just declared its independence from Britain in 1776 and won its independence through the Revolutionary War in 1783. So at this point, America is such a young nation that if you were a teenager living in this time and you had a parent who was 40 years old, they would literally be older than the entire country. Certainly, some of your older family members and some of your neighbors would have very vivid memories of the fight for America's independence, and some of them might have even fought in the War of the American Revolution. But I digress. Back here to 1814. At this point, America has found itself embroiled in another war with the British Empire, this time in a conflict we would later call the War of 1812. After a number of modest victories for both sides, there had been some fighting off and on throughout the United States and in British-controlled Canada. The British began to intensify its campaign after defeating Napoleon Bonaparte in France earlier that year, which meant that they could finally reallocate all of their resources, all of their troops, all of their ships directly to the United States to try to win this thing that had been kind of their other war on the side to this point. And this came to a head when they stormed the beaches in Virginia and a battle broke out between the American and British forces that it became apparent very quickly the British forces were going to win. A number of dignitaries, and including President Madison, were evacuated from Washington, D.C., because the British troops, after winning this battle, marched the remaining few miles to get to the city, where they laid waste to our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., vandalizing and burning many buildings in the city, including the U.S. Capitol and the White House, which you can see here they burned almost to the ground. Now, despite this escalating aggression in the war, there were rumors that both sides were looking for a peaceful solution to finally end the fighting and come up with a compromise that both nations could agree to. And a number of private citizens in the United States were deputized by the government to carry out some of these negotiations, some large and some small. Such a negotiator was this man here, Francis Scott Key, a young lawyer in Baltimore. He was sent to a British ship just outside of the port of Baltimore to negotiate the release of several American military prisoners who were being held on board of the ship in exchange for some British prisoners that were being held on shore in an American military base. Now, unfortunately, while on board, Key overhears secret plans that the officers are discussing for an impending attack by both the British Army and Navy on his hometown of Baltimore. At this point, the British Armada, the mightiest navy in the world, has been sailing across the Atlantic Ocean for several weeks and is about to launch this secret offensive to potentially wipe Baltimore off the map, with the intention then, after defeating Washington, D.C., to continue moving up the coast to New York, Boston, and hopefully forcing the United States into surrender. And this is such a terrible situation for Key to be in. He's stuck knowing his hometown, his family, his friends, everybody he knows is in grave danger of this impending attack, but he is stuck on this ship and forced to watch the battle, which is where our story continues.